So to kick off the things, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude for the opportunity to lead today's event. Hosting this session is a tremendous honor and truly excited to delve into the world of visual calculations with the PM from Microsoft and Rafael, my tech guru from the beginning on the Power BI world. I'm not about, it's not, definitely it's not about me today, myself, Gustavo, but it's about exploring this fascinating topic together with the father of the thing is Jeroen. The stage is yours.
Well, first of all, Gustavo, Rafael, thank you for having me. Thank you for setting this up. You called me the father of this thing. I guess I am to some extent. I'm not the only parent, though. I want to be very clear. There's more people than just me involved. And let's maybe stop there with like the parent analogy, because it turns out really weird if you start talking about there's like 10 or 15 people involved. So
yeah, like everything in Power BI.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm gonna start.
Let's rephrase instead of you are the representative of the visual calculations.
No. I love your analogy. It's great. So I just started sharing my screen. I also turned on the Portuguese captioning from PowerPoint, because obviously, as you can probably tell, I'm unable to speak the Portuguese language. So hopefully that will help people watching this. But yeah, feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions, either in English. That's most easy for me, of course. But then we also have people on the call that can translate from Portuguese into English, so I can actually have a chance to answer your questions as we go. So I really want to jump into this this topic, and the topic here today is really how are we making DAX easier? What are we doing to make DAX easier? And the feature that we've been building for that is called visual calculations, right? So we'll talk about the problem space, why we did this, and then a little bit about the feature. I'll show a demo, and then we'll have questions and discussions as well. Okay. So with that, let's just get into this. So you might know me. You might seen me in person or not. You might have seen me virtually somewhere. I'm pretty visible on social media, on our blog. I'm a senior product manager on the Power BI team, and I focus on DAX, so the programming language that everybody loves to hate. That is my playground. That is where I work on, and that is what I do. That's what what my ownership area is. So really, with that in mind, it should be no surprise that, of course, we started thinking about what is there about DAX that make that people like and don't like. And the reality today is that most of us write DAX like this. It is like, you find something online and you copy paste and you cross your fingers. I mean, in fact, that's how I write my DAX, and I'm the PM owner and I should know better. But this is really the reality of what many customers are facing these days of how DAX works. And that's because it's very hard. It's very hard to understand exactly what is happening in DAX, and things that seem simple are very complicated, right? So when you start working with DAX in Power BI, you go try it doesn't work, and maybe the basic things work, and then you maybe go to some blog like the SQL BI folks or some other blog from one of our community members. Maybe you read the books. I have them handy all the time, right? Maybe you read one of those or both. Look at that. Right, exactly. Yes. And then you read this. Yeah. You read this and you read it again and you read it again and again. You read it another time. And then you still don't get it. And you might give up, right? Or you try something else. This is a proud, I need to show this book because it's written by 2 Dutch MVPs. So they don't pay me to show that, actually. But anyway, you go on trading. But it's very interesting that we got this far with our product, with the core programming language being perceived as so hard. And why is it so hard? Well, there's a couple things that are surprisingly hard in Power BI, in DAX. And that is filter context. So filter context is what makes DAX really hard. So what does that mean? It means that whenever you write a DAX statement, that DAX statement is actually evaluated, executed inside of some context. And at the time that you write the statement, you don't know what that context is going to be. Now, so you can see a DAX statement. Let's say you have a very simple DAX statement that is the sum of sales amount. Very simple, right? But depending on the context in which that statement gets executed, that result of that total might change, right? It might be 5, might be 42, might be 1,000,000, depending on the context that's being set. And the product doesn't allow you to see the context, and that context is being set by many things. The model, the relationships between the model, the visual selections, any filters, any interactions from visuals, cross-filtering, etc. All of that is then being impacting the filter context in which your DAX is being executed. So that's number one. The second problem is things that sound very simple, like referring to something that is above me in a previous row, for example, is very hard. DAX doesn't allow you to do that at all. So that means that it's complicated to write measures, which is the way to write DAX today, and you do DAX calculations and measures. They are scoped into the models. That means you have to worry about all this filter context, because the model dictates the context in which the measure is being executed. So you cannot walk up to the measure and say, oh yeah, I fully understand what this does, because it is executed inside of some context that you don't see, you don't visualize. It's impossible to see that. And of course, we have something called quick measures, which allow you to do typical business type calculations very quickly, but the DAX it generates is still complicated, and that kind of negates the purpose that it is hard to then tweak that and make sure it actually does what you intended to do. So that got us thinking a little bit, and we said, what if we turn this whole thing upside down? What if instead of requiring you to write measures in DAX, which are in the model very early in the pipeline of Power BI when data has just been loaded, what if we, instead of allowing you to do the calculations here, what if we allowed you to write calculations later in the pipeline when the filter context has been applied, when the model complexity has been applied, when the data has been aggregated, just before we paint the visual onto the screen, right? So we're going to paint a line chart to the screen. What the model does is actually takes all the raw data, applies all the filter context, all the measures, then aggregates it, because we're not going to show you millions of data points. Probably we're showing you 20 or 50 or 100 data points, but not millions. So we're aggregating, summarizing the data while we're painting the visual onto the screen. What if we just allowed you to do a calculation right there when the data has been aggregated, just before we started painting the actual colored pixels onto your screen? And that is essentially what visual calculations are. They are nothing more than DAX calculations on a visual. So we will allow you to then write these calculations on a visual, and that makes it easier. It makes it easier to write these calculations. So visual calculations are DAX calculations defined on a visual, and they can refer to whatever is on the visual. They can refer to other visual calcs, but they can only refer to what's on the visual. And that is on purpose, because the moment we would allow you to reach back into the model, you would have to think about this complexity of the model again, because the model comes back into play. Think about visual calculations as a house. We just left all the complexity outside of the house. You're only inside this little house. You understand exactly what you have inside of the house. The moment you reach back outside, the weather patterns come in, the complexity comes in. So we don't want to worry about that. So visual calcs can only refer to what's on the visual. And then because visual calcs are on a visual, they have certain tricks that model measures don't have. And that is because model measures have no idea of the visual they're on. They have zero insight whether they are on a map, on a bar chart, on a line chart, on a card. They have zero idea, because that's also how they were designed. They're all the way up here in the model, not on the visual side. Visual calcs actually know in what type of visual they are in. So they can do tricks referring to the axes, for example, the horizontal or vertical axes of a visual. And I'll show you that in a second. So visual calcs are just another way of doing calculations in Power BI. We're not taking anything away, right? You still have calculated columns. You still have measures. You now have a new tool, visual calculations. And in many ways, it is as if we took the best from calculated columns and the best from measures, and we rolled that into Visual Calcs. Because calculated columns are great because it's very easy. If you look at a table where you define the calculated column on, you can look at the result and go, oh yeah, I understand how this number was calculated because it's row by row by row. You can look at the numbers and go, yeah, this makes sense, right? You can easily see it happening inside the table. The downside of calculated columns is it's all computed at data set refresh, so it's not interactive with what the user is currently doing. There's no filter context being used. And it also bloats your model. Measures are great because they are interactive. They're calculated on the fly. Great. But the downside is they are in the model and have to deal with filter context, which you cannot really see. So that makes them hard to use. Now, visual calculations use what we call a visual context. So they are essentially executed row by row inside of the visual, and then they're also calculated on the fly. So it's basically the best of both worlds. You get the very simple understanding of what's happening with the on-the-fly calculation of a measure, and that's then what a visual calculation is. Okay, so with that, let me just show you one more slide before I show you a demo. So this is the most important slide and the key to understanding how visual calculations work. So the mental model, as we like to say, for visual calculations is, if you think about any visual, you can show that visual in a matrix. If the visual is a simple line chart or a complicated small multiple or a map or an R visual, doesn't matter. All of those visuals can always be represented as a matrix. And that's the core premise. We show you the visual and we show you what we call the visual matrix, which is the data that sits under that visual, and we show you both. So now, while you work with visual calculations on that visual, you'll see exactly the data that we aggregated from the model to paint this visual onto your screen, right? So in the example over here, if you look at my slides, you'll see that I have a mock-up of a bar chart of 3 categories, 3 years in this case, and 2 bars per category. So to paint this visual onto the screen, Power BI needs 3 rows and 3 columns. 1 column contains the year name, the category name. 1 column contains the numbers for one of the bars, in this case sales amount, and then the other column contains the numbers for the second bar, which is total product cost. That is all that Power BI needs to paint this visual onto your screen. There might be millions of rows under here in the model, but at this point, you don't care. Because we're not showing you millions of data points, we're just showing you 6 numbers in a bar chart. Now, that is what a visual matrix shows. It shows you exactly the numbers that you're seeing on the visual. So these two are tied together. And then in the middle, you have a formula bar that you can use to add columns onto the visual matrix. So then visual calculations are columns that you add on that visual matrix, using the data that you can see in the visual matrix. Okay? So that's the most important thing to remember. The visual matrix is the same thing as the visual. It shows the data that is in the visual, and it then shows the visual calcs on that visual. Okay? So with that, let me just switch to a demo, and I can show you really quick how that works. Okay, so let me show the demo. Hopefully the subtitles will continue while I'm doing the demo. So that hopefully that will keep working. And then afterwards we can break for questions, okay? Cool. So you should see my Power BI desktop here. This is not a trick. This is live in the product right now. You can, if you have the latest version of Power BI desktop, you can enable this in preview features. So you go to options and settings, find visual calculations, click OK, restart your desktop, and then you can follow along with me even, or watch the recording later, and then and then try this for yourself. Okay. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to build a very simple visual. Oops, sales amount and total product cost. Now I'm using an internal version of our software, so this is a little bit slower than what you're used to normally. So on your machine it might actually be faster, but don't worry, it will be okay. So I have a very simple visual here, right? It's nothing special. It's just showing me the sales amount and total product cost for the years, and I'm going to sort it by fiscal year. So we actually have the, whoops, I want to sort that fiscal year ascending, so 2018, 2019, 2020. Okay, so top to bottom, FY 2018, I see total product cost, light blue bars, and sales amount, dark blue bars. Nothing special. Now, I can now select this visual. I already have it selected. And when I have it selected, here on the Home tab, I see a new button being light up, New Calculation. If I don't have any visual selected, that button is not enabled. So this is your entry point into getting into Visual Calcs mode, Visual Calculations mode, right? So you select the visual in which you want to add the calculation. Then I'm going to press New Calculation. I'm now in a screen that we like to call the Visual Calculations Edit mode. This should feel comfortable by now. You should recognize this because I just showed you the mock-up on the slide, right? I showed you exactly the same, which is the visual on the top, and then the visual matrix at the bottom. And you can compare, you can see, for example, here, this bar is $51 million and a little bit, right? Which is exactly this number over here. So you can see these two things match up, right? 2020 sales amount, 51,800,000 and something. That is exactly what is happening here. 51,800,000 and something. Great. So far, so good. Okay. And now you see this friendly cursor over here, and you already see a placeholder calculation column. And this is now where I'm going to use visual calculation. So let me just write a very simple one just to get started. So I'm just going to say I'm going to calculate profit. And profit is going to be sales amount minus total product cost. Now, before I press enter, a couple things to note. Yes, this should have been a measure because profit is such a basic thing that I should actually build into a measure and reuse it everywhere. But just for a very simple example, this is an easy example. Also, this is not like a measure. Because in a measure, in order for this to work, what would I have to do? I would have to do sum of sales amount minus sum of total product cost, which is something that most people don't even get the first time they're starting with Power BI. They don't understand that I see a table here with sales amount. I see a table with product cost. Why can I not just subtract the two numbers like I can in Excel? Well, you have to apply an aggregate. Here you don't, because why? This is executed like a calculated column, row by row. So if I press enter, what it will do is it will just take the sales amount from each row, take the total product cost from the same row, subtract those, and return that result. Also notice I didn't have any table references in my expression, because at this point, I don't care which table it came from. I just see these names, total product cost and total sales amount, and that is what I refer to. In fact, I can even rename the sales amount to say Gustavo's. Oops, if I can actually type your name, sorry. Gustavo's sales amount.
Yeah.
Gustavo's. So now I changed it, right? And now if I go in here, you'll now see that this just only refers to Gustavo's sales amount, right? So it refers to the names that you're seeing here. It's very visual. Great. Cool. Let's do something more intelligent. Let's say I want to get the difference in year. Okay, so I want to get the profit, and I want to subtract the profit from the previous year from this. So I want to calculate the difference in profit across the years that I have in my visual. Okay, so I take profit, I do minus, then I need to get the previous profit. So a guess to the function I would use for this?
Previous year.
Previous year? Nah, it's even easier than that. You just type previous. You just type previous. So you do previous and you say profit. Look, this is almost English.
Yeah.
Right? It's not complicated. You can look at this and go, yeah, I understand what this does. It takes the profit and then looks if there's a previous profit, takes that number and subtracts the two. Would this work? Well, yeah, of course this works because I made it. Look, now I have the difference in profit over the years. Let's try something even more complicated. How about a running sum? Running sum means, you know, start somewhere, keep summing all the numbers until you're at the end, right? Very basic stuff for most people, but hard to do in Power BI. So running sum of profit. Any guesses to the function name for running sum? What function would you use? Would it be something with a calculate and a top N1? And
it's some ranking you need to use to something like copy or rank it to.
I think I might say it depends.
Well, the answer here is very simple.
Yeah.
It's literally just called running sum. Look, it's running sum. And all I have to say is running sum of profit. And could it be that easy? It is that easy. Now I have a running sum of profit. So I can do more stuff. We have a template in here. Templates are just to get you started. You don't have to use the templates. You can type, but just to help you discover what you can do. So there's other things that you can do. You can do moving average. You can do a percent of parent, percent of grand total, average of children, versus first, versus next, versus last. So we had a couple interesting things already. Moving average. Let's try a moving average. What would be the function name for moving average? Maybe
Running average.
moving average? Let's try. There we go. Moving average, profit. So I'm calculating the moving average of profit. Then I need to specify a window size, which basically means how many years in this example do I want to take into account. So I'm going to calculate the moving average over 2 years, right? Done. Moving average. Great. So I built a couple very powerful calculations in just a couple lines of DAX that used to take at least 20 or more lines of DAX each. I wrote all of these with like 4 lines of DAX. Now, of course, before I wrap up my demo, as you can look at my visual, it is horrible, right? Everything that I did in my visual matrix is now shown on my visual. So how can I resolve that? Well, you might think, let's say I only want to show the difference in profit. I will just delete everything else. So I go over here and delete everything. But if I do that, I'm violating rule number 1 of visual calcs, which is it can only work with what's on the visual matrix. So if I delete difference of profit, well, look at the expression. Difference of profit relies on profit. So if I delete profit, that will stop working. If I delete Gustavo's sales amount, of course it will stop working because profit refers to it. So I cannot delete the stuff from the visual matrix. But what I can do is I can hide it from the visual. So this icon, little eye icon, you might know from the model view. We showed that here as well. So now we can say, you know what? I'm just going to hide the stuff that I don't want to see on the visual. Look, the visual is updating. The visual matrix stays the same, right? I can now say, hey, I'm just going to show the difference in profit, and I'm going to move the running sum and the moving average to the tooltips. And now I actually have the visual that I was after. If I go back out, this visual is now done. It didn't exist before. I have a difference in profit. I have a running sum in profit and a moving average using very, very, very simple DAX that wasn't able to do before and had to use very complicated functions. So that's my quick demo of visual calcs. Now I saw some comments coming in, so maybe this is a good time to take some questions. Gustavo, Rafael?
Yeah. So we have a great member of our community here, Mr. André Ja. He is asking about calculation groups interactions. If there is, let me rephrase that, is any difficult appearance when you try to implement calculation groups, or if calculation groups is out of the context of the graph? Maybe the graph is the context, yeah?
So calculation groups, they change the measures, right, that you're seeing, right? So we've tested this with calculation groups. So far, we've seen that it works as expected. So obviously, if you have a calculation group, that changes any measures you have on your visual, right? The calculation groups cannot impact visual calculations because calculation groups are in the model, they change the measures. Visual calculations are not in the model, they're on the visual. So if you have an actual measure, and of course I didn't have any measure, I only used implicit measures. But if you have explicit measures, you can change that value of that measure with the calculation group. And then since the calculation group is outside of the scope for visual calculations, it basically means that, let's imagine if I go back into here, right? Let's imagine this Gustavo sales amount was an explicit measure, right? That is changed by a calculation group. Well, then these numbers will update. That's fine, because profit will just take these new numbers, right? Let's imagine these numbers are now like ×2. Fine. Then profit will just say, okay, I'm going to take that number and still subtract that number. So for visual calculations, they are not aware of calculation groups in the sense that they're outside the house. oh, the number has changed. I don't know why, but I don't care. I'll just take the new number.
Yeah, the context is the graph itself.
Yeah.
Yes. And nothing else. So the graph itself is the only thing you know. So, for example, if I set a filter, right? Let's do this, right? Let's say I do a filter, or maybe a cross thingy. So I'm just going to take the color, build a new slicer with that. So, okay, great. Now, of course, if I select one, then of course the chart changes.
Yeah.
Because the context has changed. The numbers that the chart needs to show have changed. So of course your calculation, being only aware of what's inside of the chart, has no other option than just update itself and reflect those new selections. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Visual calcs are working with the numbers of the visuals, or it is translated to DAX, to the analysis apps inside Power BI. Did you
So is it
understand? Visual calcs, all the calcs that I create in the visual calcs, these visuals are calculated with the data of the visual, or they are translated to another DAX function?
No. They are executed with the data of the visual. So if you look at this, I can show you actually.
This is great because we don't have to working with new data to query new data from the models.
Right.
This is great.
So I can actually show you. This is the performance analyzer, and if I run this in DAX query view, you'll see the exact query that I run.
Yeah.
So in here, you'll see at the top, you'll see the names of the visual calcs and their expressions, right? So you see your moving average in here. You see your running sum. You see how I calculated the difference in profit. You actually see also how I calculated profit, right? Now you get a lot of red squigglies. That we'll fix that. But that is what you see. And then you'll see the query being executed, which is just getting the data from the model. And then afterwards applying all of these this visual calculations on top. So it's part of the query that we send to the model.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm not seeing any more questions. I will ask for the community in here in Portuguese, Jay, sorry. Pessoal, quiserem mandar perguntas aí, abrir o microfone, fazer a pergunta também, está totalmente disponível aqui para nós, aqui nessa tarde. Agradecer a todos aí que estão presentes também. E se tiverem perguntas que não conseguirem mandar agora também, podem mandar aqui no chat que eu endereço depois. Mas por hora, acho que só o André fez uma pergunta aqui, né? Sim. We do have a question on the chat.
Yep. I see
the
it.
visual calculation works in analysis servers.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, it will eventually, but not right now. Because as I showed you here, if you look back into the query, these functions are right here. So this means these functions are sent to the source. So that means Azure Analysis Services needs to understand what the running sum function is. Right now, it doesn't know it. It will just say, I don't understand this DAX. You will just get an error. But it will eventually. Like our plan is to allow you to update AES, Azure Analysis Services, as well as SQL Server Analysis Services to make sure that they understand this DAX. So yeah, the answer is it will, but not right now.
Another question.
For now, it is just the Power BI service.
Another question.
Yes.
To SQL Analysis Services, the documentation says that this is not supported. But with a live connection to Azure Analysis Services, we can we can change to direct query.
Yes, but then still no.
Okay.
It's not supported yet. So it will be supported, but it's not there yet. I mean, let's also remind ourselves this feature is 3 weeks old. right?
Yeah.
So there's loads of stuff that is not working yet. And it's absolutely in preview. But I see Vinicius, sorry if I
And how about
mispronounced your name.
Direct-to-Lake? And how about Direct-to-Lake?
Direct Lake will also be supported, but not right now.
Yeah.
So, but I see there's a like unhappy smiley in the chat. I'm not saying it is not coming. It is absolutely coming.
Yeah.
But it's just simply not there yet. There's so much stuff that we still have to do, which is basic. And then, but like keep the faith, as you said, Gustavo. It is absolutely coming. I'm not like we are planning to support AAS. We are planning to support SQL Server Analysis Service. It just takes time to get there. So please keep the faith there. Also, I noticed in the chat, sorry, I've been translating the Portuguese using the automatic translator, using Teams. So I noticed somebody asking about calculate. You don't have to write calculate, but you can. So in fact, you are actually writing calculate when you use the Visual Calcs functions.
Sure.
Because under the covers, we translate it into a calculate when it arrives at the AS engine. So, you know, for example, you could write, you don't have to, but you can write calculate in here, right? So you can write this, right? You can do whatever, sum of sales amount, right? You could do this, right? It's useless because it's just executed row by row. It doesn't do anything useful, but you can do it, right? And that's because if I wrote this, if I wrote first, which is a function I haven't shown you yet, but if I wrote first of profit, I will get the same number every single time. So this should always be 4, right? So 4, that number is just repeated everywhere. Great. So, but this first is actually equal to, so I can say this is actually equal to calculate first of profit on rows, which is something we can talk about as well. And this is actually the same as calculate sum of profit index 1, right? So you are actually writing calculate, but you don't have to write calculate, right? So we use calculate under the covers when we executing this.
We do have more 2 questions on the chat. If you pick one.
Which one?
I think on the queue is from Felipe Rocha. The calculation seems very simple. It's amazing. It's about reutilization of the measure, I suppose.
Yeah. So right now there is no reusability of calculations, right? They are defined in the visual. No, you have to copy paste in between visuals, which is, I would say, not the best experience ever. So we want to change that. We want to make it easier to reuse these, but we're still working through that. Now, I think reusability is a spectrum. So today I would score visual calculations 0 out of 10 points. Measures are about 8 of 10 because you can reuse them in the same semantic model, but you cannot reuse them across semantic models. I think visual calculations will be somewhere between that 0 and 8, but we are still figuring that out, what that would mean, because we cannot push them back into the model, because pushing them back into the model kind of negates their purpose, right? It undoes why we did this. It's because you then have to worry about filter context again, right? So we have to figure out how it's easier to reuse these. So right now there's no reuse. You can just copy paste these, but that means if you want to change the logic, you have to change it everywhere, which is not great. So we're working through that. But again, this is 3 weeks old.
Great. Another one from Vinicius. In terms of the performance, it's better nowadays to utilize calculations for these more complex running measures or moving average rather than building the measures itself.
Yeah,
I think it's not related so much to.
Well,
yeah, feel free. Yeah.
No, I think Vinicius has a good point. It is. You will see that anything you can do in Visual Calcs that you did before in a measure will probably perform faster already. And it will become even faster in the future because we haven't done any performance optimization yet on visual calculations. We will, but it's already faster. And why is that? Because when a measure is executed, it's always executed in isolation on its own. And then it isn't aware of any aggregations that are around. So it will always go to the lowest level of data. Now, for many calculations, including the ones you do in measures, you don't have to have the lowest level of data. You can just use an aggregated level of data, right? So, for example, here, this running sum, it only knows about 4 numbers. Three numbers, actually. Yep. One for each year. That's all it needs, right? That's the only thing it's aware of. Now, there could be millions of records under here that came to those 3 numbers. But the running sum, when it gets executed, only has access to these 3 numbers. That's all. So we can safely assume that Power BI will be very fast to do this, right? So to put it another way, let's imagine you created this visual that I have here. Let me get rid of this test thing. So maybe not entirely this visual, just this. Okay. So let me say I created this using measures. Okay. So how many times did we send a query to the source using, if I just used measures? Well, there's one to get the data and the implicit measures. So that's one query. So the years and the sales amount, the total product cost. So then I have this, great. Then one for each measure, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 queries. Now, Visual Calcs, because they are not measures, only sends one query to get the aggregated data, sales, fiscal year, total product cost, and the sales amount. And then after that has been retrieved, all the calculations are executed on this aggregated and cached data. So you only have one query to the source and not 5. So here you can see that immediately just using Visual Calcs instead of measures will reduce the number of queries, will increase your performance. We've seen in tests by about 500%, which is a 5-time increase. It's crazy, but yes. So I would absolutely recommend, if the reusability limitations is not a problem for you, if you have these one-off things that you build in measures that you only use in one visual, switch them to visual calculations. So that's what I would do. So then Vitor is asking if there's anything in calculation that we cannot do with measures, but we can do with Visual Calcs. Now, this is a great question. There is many things that measures can do that you cannot do with Visual Calcs. So I'll answer the reverse first. For example, you cannot refer back into the model. So using related or used relationship as a function will just not work because, you know, it doesn't know that, right? So I can type used relationship, right, and do something. I don't know, date. Look, it's not even allowing me to do anything, right? It just doesn't recognize it. So this will not work. And if I try this, it will tell me this, like it does not have any insight into the model. So functions that rely on the model will not be available. Now, are there things that you can do in visual calculations that you cannot do in a measure? And the answer is absolutely yes, because you can refer to the visual structure. So in here, if we go to the RS profit, I actually am referring to the visual structure over here. Because if you look closely, it doesn't say at all that I want to run this profit over years. There's nowhere in this expression that says that it needs to run this running sum over years, right? It just says running sum of profit. Because if I change my fiscal year to a fiscal quarter, let's say, this will still work. So it's very flexible because it's not as pinned down to a measure where you have to say, no, this running sum is over years. You cannot run a sum over quarters. Why is this? Because, let me just switch it back to years. Okay, so why is this? It's because under the covers, there's actually a little trick that we're doing here. So there's actually a parameter that we call the axis. So and that's an optional parameter. It's set to rows by default. So this basically means whatever is on the rows axis, we're going to calculate that, right? So we're going top to bottom, whatever happens to be there, we're going to calculate over that. So you can now just refer to this rows as the structure. So now this running sum is very flexible. If you change it around, change the fields, it will still continue working. So these visual calcs allow you to play with what is on these axes to actually refer to those, which you cannot do in measures.
Okay.
So let's see what else is there.
Another question from Vinicius. With the explanations, isn't there some optimization plan for the DAX engine itself to identify that the calculation could be done how visual measure work? I don't understand.
So, no, I think I do understand the question. Also, before I answer, I will be very annoying and very pedantic for a second. But please don't think about these as measures, because they aren't measures. So Vinicius, you think about them now as visual measures. They are not visual measures. We picked this name on purpose. Please think about them as not measures, because they are not the same as measures. They are different. That's why we picked them, called them visual calculations, to make sure you understand they are not measures. So anyway, sorry, I'll turn off my pedantic mode for a second.
It's something simple to say. Measures work at the data level. Visual calculations works at the visual level.
Correct. Yeah? So that's the difference, right? They are not the same thing. That's why we picked a different name. Anyway, so yes, there is absolutely some optimization that you could do for the DAX engine to say, hey, this measure should actually have been a visual calc, right? There's stuff that we can do there. We haven't done it yet, but we could imagine you having loads of one-off measures that you only use in one visual or a couple visual. We could recommend you write that as a visual calc. But also the reverse, right? If we see you writing the same visual calc over and over and over again using copy-paste, why wouldn't we tell you at some point, hey, you have the same visual calc 5 times now. Wouldn't it be better if you wrote that into a measure? Oh, and by the way, do you want me to convert that into a measure for you, right? Do you want me to just convert this thing and store it into the model and get rid of all the visual calcs and just move everything into the measure because for reuse? And then you can make the choice, and then we'll help you write that thing as a measure. So both ways, right? So we will absolutely at some point tell you, hey, you're doing everything in visual calc. That doesn't make any sense. You should do a measure. Or you've got these 15 measures here that you only use in one visual. Why don't you just make a visual calc?
Good point from Vinicius again. The order of the visuals impacting the how the calculations will work. Okay.
Yes. So it does impact it. So if I change the sort order, it does impact it. However, today you cannot change the sort order on the visual matrix. So even though, where's my mouse cursor? Even though it shows this little thingy, this little triangle, it implies that you can click on this and change the sort. I'm clicking. I don't know if you can hear, but I'm clicking. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't work yet.
Yeah.
So, but it will. So that means you can change the sort order on this visual matrix, on the visual, and then the visual calculation will change, right? But of course, because if it's a relative movement. So if I now sorted C to A or A to Z, then of course what is previous is different, right? Let's say I sorted something A to Z, then if I'm at B, then the previous is A, right? If I sorted something Z to A, if I'm at C, then the previous is not B, it is D, right? So it's a different direction I'm going. So yes, this will change. You will be able to change the sort order. If you wanted, you could actually pin down the sort order, because visual calculations are just shortcuts to window functions. So you could actually you could expand all of these into window functions, as I did with first, into index. If you do that, you can actually write down the sort order using order by. And then you can force it to run in a certain sort order. So then it's not responsive to the sort order of the visual. So you could say, I want to do a running sum, but then ordering by fiscal year ascending. I don't care if we actually show fiscal year descending, it will always be under ascending, right? So that's a way you could pin it down. So I think Andre is asking, where will it appear when looking with tabular editor? It won't, because tabular editor looks at the model.
Yeah.
It doesn't see these things because these are not in the model. So it will just not show.
Okay, we are 1 hour now, and feel free, Jay. I know if you might have another meetings as well. We have one question from Vinicius.
I still have about 8 minutes or so that I can stick around.
Great, great. Thank you.
So Vinicius has a great point. Wouldn't it make sense to have a function and a parameter for the function? And you're absolutely spot on. That is something that we're actively thinking through. So right now there is no such thing. You cannot change. You cannot decide whether or not you follow the visual sort order or you want to specify some sort order. You can't. We're thinking through what that should be, right? The challenge is, let's imagine I have this running sum of profit, right? If I show this in a let me change the visual for a sec. I'm going to show this as this, but then not with the diff profit. I'm going to put the running sum of profit over here, right? This makes sense, right? Because it's a running sum. So logically, as a user, you expect the line to go upwards, right? Because a running sum should never decrease. It should always either be flat or go up. So if I change the sort order over here, let me just say descending, the line still goes up. Because now we're running summing over 2018, 2019, 2020. So it still makes sense from the user perspective. If, however, I had pinned the running sum to only do the running sum over 2018, followed by 2019, followed by 2020, then the line would not go up. The line would go down. Yeah. Which, is that comprehensible to the user when they see something called running sum? They automatically expect the line to go like this. But then if I pinned it down with the sort order, the line would go like this. Does that make sense? How do we explain that to the user, that what they're looking at is not an actual running sum of what's in the visual, it's a running sum of whatever happens to be the sort order that the user that wrote it put down into the running sum, right? So how do we explain that to the user is a tough challenge. There will always be some crazy users. Well, in fact, there will always be some crazy report developers, I think.
Crazy people controls the world.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So no, but I like how you guys are thinking, how all of you are thinking. This is exactly where we are as well. We're like thinking through this and like every day we think about this. So if you have ideas on how you would like this to work, please send them to me, or better use I'll type the link into the chat. aka.visuals-calculations-feedback.
Oh, great.
So if you go there, you could actually leave a message and tell me, hey, you know, I thought about this. This is a challenge. It's not working for me. This is how I would like it to work. You could absolutely leave that feedback there. I would love to learn that from you. We're working through this every day, so we're just getting started. We're far from done. So this is the moment for you to influence those decisions, right? So I'm just also going to show that link on here, just so people can easily see it, so don't have to monitor the chat, right? So please leave your feedback here as well. So yeah, so Andre, does it work in PBIP? It will. Yes, it will work in PBIP.
For all understanding, this is a feature in preview. This is not a feature in GA. A lot of things will be included and changed till this we will go through GA. So
yes,
calm down.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah, take a deep breath.
Yes, no, there's loads of things that we still need to do, right?
Yeah.
There's basic things like formatting. If you go in here, I don't know if you noticed, but if I go in here, Come on. Yeah, okay. So if I go in here, you see that this is formatted as currency, right?
No.
Dollars. But look, the moment I wrote that in a Visual Calc, the format disappeared. There's no dollar signs here. There's no nice formatting here. It's all gone. And I cannot get to some kind of formatting. I mean, there's no formatting option over on the Visual Calc right now. So those are like the basic things that we're still building and we're still missing. Conditional formatting, also a hot topic, not there. Support for field parameters, not there. But the answer is not that it will not come. The answer is
Additional formatting.
yeah, it will come eventually. So it's not there yet. It is not there right now.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It would be great, for example, if I could use conditional formatting to say, you know what, color the bar based on this profit difference calculation, colors the line, you know, add a red bar whenever the difference in profit was below zero, for example, right? Would be a great scenario to have conditional formatting rules based on that Visual Calc. You can't do it today. So it's just coming. We're really building all of that, but it's coming. Cool.
Good.
So yeah.
Thank you, Jeroen. I think this was a great talk. Thank you a lot to talk to our guys, our friends here in Brazil. We are a great country and that loves Power BI. Do you know that? Do you know that that's a lot of MVPs in Power BI here in Brazil. They work very hard to take these informations and translate to our country, to our language. Thanks a lot again, and I see you in another PGA, in a PGA for someday.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you for having me. Thanks for doing this for your community. Sorry, I don't speak all languages in the world, so we'll have to do with this.
You are not Christian Wade. Do you know that Christian Wade talk?
Yeah.
Speak Portuguese.
I'm aware.
Okay.
I'm very much aware. He speaks more languages than I do. I speak only German, English, and Dutch, which is arguably not.
It's because her mother is Brazilian.
Yeah. No, I know. So no, thank you for having me. And I'll leave you with this thought that, you know, somebody on the DAX memes person on Twitter left a while ago. What DAX felt like. Now we get Visual Calcs. I think this is exactly what we're doing here, is trying to make it easier. So please try it. Please, you know, test it out, see what you think, and tell me what you like, what you don't like. I mean, I need your feedback. I need you to try it. I need you to tell me what should be better and what is already great, right? So what is missing? Maybe you missed a function. Maybe we missed some kind of way to influence what's happening. So please try it out and give us the feedback. And then together we can make this into a great feature.
Good.
Okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Portuguese
Thank you
here.
so much.
We are not talking Portuguese for our audience, okay?
Yeah.
Valeu, galera. Obrigado. Agradecer ao Léo pelo convite, ao Jeroen por esse bate-papo. Foi muito legal. Vai ficar depois gravado, né, Léo? Você vai disponibilizar onde? No LinkedIn?
No YouTube, LinkedIn.
No LinkedIn, YouTube. Então, depois dá uma conferida aí. Manda, né, o feedback para o Jeroen, vai ser muito importante. O time de desenvolvimento da Microsoft é muito atencioso com a comunidade. Então, sim, aquilo que a gente fala é, lógico, dentro das possibilidades é atendido. Então, digam, falem, né? Se mostrem que isso é bastante importante para o desenvolvimento e para o crescimento da nossa ferramenta, principalmente numa feature tão legal, né, que era muito pedida no Power BI. Isso simplifica demais a vida de cálculos.
Yes. So I can't speak Dutch, but maybe Deutsch. So
Ich möge ein Bier, bitte.
Yeah. So No, danke schön,
Jeroen
Jeroen.
understand it. Jeroen understand.
Yeah, danke
You already
schön.
typed it in Dutch in the chat, so that was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Bye-bye.
enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.